Coney Ealy, if Carolina had gone on and won that Super Bowl, probably would have been the MVP of the Super Bowl. He had a phenomenal game. He's a young player. He goes to New England. It doesn't work out. Sheldon Richardson is, to me, a rare talent at the defensive tackle position. And he adds to what is already one of, as you mentioned, the top defenses over the last 7 years. What they've done up there, their commitment to being great in their culture and their level of accountability with one another defensively has always intrigued me. And I think Sheldon Richardson could be a major piece there. Now, in New York, the talent's there. Sometimes it showed, sometimes it didn't. And I think that frustrated them, and there were some issues in the locker room, et cetera, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out in New York. I think that culture and that leadership in Seattle can bring something out in Sheldon Richardson. He might be the acquisition of the year on defense in the NFL.
You mentioned Sheldon Richardson having some locker room issues in New York. So one of the stories of the offseason, I'm curious your opinion on it, has been Seattle's locker room issues, an offense-defense struggle. And you very often, when one unit's really dominant, hear about that. It seems like we hear about it more with the Seahawks ever since the Super Bowl that they didn't win than with any other team. Is that a real thing? Is that something that concerns you? Or is that something that it's just we got stuff to talk about, so we talk about it, but it's not something to worry about once the games start?
Probably a little bit of both. I think Seattle is kind of a social experiment to a certain degree. Pete Carroll's an interesting guy. He and I've read articles where Pete needs to be tougher. Pete's tough. Players are held accountable there. They're also given the ability to speak their mind. And Richard Sherman is an intelligent guy. He's a great player. I think he was dinged at points last year. I'm looking forward to seeing him healthy. The question is, who's going to play opposite him? That locker room is fine. The divide there for me as an outsider looking in is more offense versus defense. And, every year they seem to revamp the offensive line, and now they've got Lacey in at running back. And, they've been trying to kind of patch people in to replace Marshawn Lynch. And Marshawn was so much tied to their identity, and that defensive side of the ball had such a great deal of respect for Marshawn. And once again, I think that defensive side holds everybody accountable, whether it's the offensive coordinator, the running back, the quarterback, the offensive line. But how that offensive line plays will be a big key, and I think the defense could be dominant.
Howie, let's skip to the Giants and the Cowboys, a Sunday night's game, big marquee game, NFC East matchup. You've been talking about defenses. How does Dallas cover up their defense that last year Ezekiel Elliott and that rushing attack was able to be a great deodorant for?
Is Ezekiel playing?
Yes, week number 1, yes.
Okay, well, week number 1 it's not as much of a concern because that offensive line, Ezekiel Elliott, their ability to dictate terms, control the clock, time of possession, et cetera, it has a trickle effect to their defense. And I think they do a great job down there of flying around. You don't know who a lot of the players are. Lee is a great middle linebacker. I think Smith, getting him back healthy, will be a big deal. Crawford's back. They're going to have to win the same style of game they did last year. It's going to have to be on offense, and it's going to have to be with a physical tempo-setting offensive attack. And I think Dak Prescott, everyone talks about Dak Prescott. Will he regress in his second year? Why would you even think that? Dak Prescott had no stage fright as a rookie. Got thrust into the lineup early in the season. Granted, it's maybe the best, I think it's by a wide margin, offensive line in football. Maybe the best running back in football. Witten looks like he's running a 5.3, but all he does is he's open and he catches balls. I don't know how that happens. Dez is a dynamic player. They have dynamic players on the outside, but I think everything starts with their offensive line and their running attack.
Howie, the big question mark on the Giants side is going to be whether Odell Beckham Jr. is going to play. He hasn't practiced all week. He's been questionable. He's not even sure if he can play with that high ankle sprain. This is an offense that we're all talking about going through this guy. How can this team do without him in the lineup?
Well, I think it's one of those injuries, and I guess I saw he was dancing on Instagram. I don't know. I don't know what that means in terms of your ability to play on Sunday night. But I would be surprised if he doesn't play. I think there's a lot of pressure to play. As players, we feel that internally, we feel it externally, and particularly in a market like that. And when you're a marquee player like Odell is, and you're as explosive and dynamic an offensive weapon as there is in the National Football League. But let's not forget, you've got Brandon Marshall, you've got Shepard, you've got this kid Ingram. I think the Giants, if that offensive line can come together, and that's a big if based on last year, this football team can be really, really good, and Eli will have a great year. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to run the risk of, are we going to have Odell? Would you rather have Odell for 1-2 weeks and then have him hampered the whole year? Or do we want to play it safe and let this thing play out and get him back healthy and have him for 14, 15 really good games?
Well, you touched on exactly what I wanted to ask you about, Howie, which is the smart thing, probably, even though it's against the Cowboys, divisional game, first game of the year, Odell, get back to full strength or as close as you can. But
nobody's full. The minute you walk on the field is the best you're going to feel.
Well, get as close as you can without re-aggravating an injury. But as a player, not that you had many awful games, but I'm sure you had some games that bothered you. Odell had a game.
I burnt my entire uniform, Nick.
Really?
Literally went back to the facility, put tape remover on my uniform and burnt it because I didn't want to wear that uniform again. There was only a couple of them, but yeah.
Okay, so imagine that scenario, except it's a playoff game. You're I don't know how old you were when that happened. I mean, Odell is coming off what he believes to be the worst game of his career. The situation that he thinks he's expressed to us was the most embarrassing professional one of his career. And now he might not play week 1. As a player, does the way the last game went down, essentially, put more pressure on him internally? I got to get out there. Even if we're not full strength, I got to go play.
Nick, I think as athletes, you've got to, that's in the rearview mirror. I can't dwell on that. I'm dealing with the here and now. I can only deal with today. I can't take... Win the day was a saying that Chip Kelly had at Oregon, and I'm a big believer in it. Win the day. I can't do anything about yesterday, can't do anything about tomorrow. I can control right now, and I think Odell has to do that. And only Odell knows. And I've had the feeling through this whole injury, and it brings up a whole nother topic of where are we headed in terms of the strike zone on players. I mean, you can't hit high. I think we're heading in the direction of not being able to hit low. So is it the American League strike zone or is it the National League strike zone? And it's a challenge because the game is bigger, stronger, and faster. These safeties, you see the hit right here. It's, that's where DBs, linebackers are forced to go now, because if you're anywhere around the chest, chances are you're going to slide up to the chin. I've had the impression throughout this whole kind of lead up to this game that Odell's going to play. That's just my gut. I don't know about you, Cris.
Well, that could be your gut. I might have to talk to you.
You're his nephew. He's your nephew.
Hey,
I'm not related.
Howie, he's a wide receiver. It's a primetime game. The lights are going to be on. It's going to be hard for him not to be.
He is the closest thing we have to a moth in the NFL. You turn that backlight on, that moth just flies to the light.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from some of our other great shows on FS1.